first reader this evening is Kiki Petrosino. Kiki Petrosino's newest collection of poems, Hymn for the Black Terrific, is a brave and breathless book. A book written hot and passionate, but one that's also unabashedly literary and scholarly. A collection filled with equal parts books, bones, and knives. The phrase Black Terrific comes from Moby Dick, and this book-long hymn includes subjects of race, with withering lines and epigraphs from Thomas Jefferson, self-portraits, self-loathing, allergenesis, a paean to ancestors, and that's only some of the first section. The second section, Molotris, is a series of 10 poems that play with a sonnet form, each end word coming from a Thomas Jefferson quote. The third section uses the character the Eater, with each poem inspired by the name of Chinese dishes. Spell, sonnet, structured free verse, or prose poem, this poet makes wild associative leaps and dares us to follow as she jumps through thorny wordplay, disturbing dreamlike images, and lines so direct they make us squirm or laugh. Kiki Petrosino was born in Baltimore and received her BA from the University of Virginia. She earned degrees from University of Chicago and the Iowa Writers Workshop. Her debut collection, Fort Red Border, which also appeared from Sarah Band, was shortlisted for the Forward Book of the Year in Poetry. She is the co-editor of Transom, an independent online poetry journal, and she teaches creative writing at the University of Louisville. And she's also a really warm, generous, and terrific person who shares my love for Indian food. So I hope you all welcome to our podium and a part of our River Styx sprawling dysfunctional family, Kiki Petrosino.
Thank you, Richard, for that warm introduction. It's true about the Indian food and Chinese food and any food. I love it. I'm going to start sort of recognizing a little bit the solemnity of the day with a poem called Envoy, and the words you will note don't come from me. Envoy. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Towards justice, the arc of it bends. The moral long, but universe is towards justice, long, but the arc of the moral, it bends. It bends. Universe is the moral towards justice, the arc of long, but it bends, the arc of. Universe is towards justice, the moral, long, but towards justice, it bends universes, the arc of. I guess I'll start by reading some poems from my latest book, Hymn for the Black Terrific. Personal style monologue. The doctor is in, martinis are out. Dirty is in, stripes are out. Absence is out, driving is in. Black lung is in, angry is out. Bacon is in, sparkles are in. Elbows are in, wasp waists are in. Portugal is out, Velveeta is in. The strokes are out, kisses back in. Time travel is in, going out is out. To be in is out, to be out is still out. Caves are in, vampires are in, gullets are out. The power is out, darkness is in, America is out, America is out, the dark is here. Everybody, when I was moving to Louisville, everybody told me about the Kentucky Derby and bourbon and the wonderful art and the wonderful literature scene, but no one told me that the Ohio River Valley is like the #1 worst spot for allergies in the country, and I already had allergies from living in the Midwest anyway. I lived in Chicago and then I lived in Iowa, and that's when I developed some seasonal allergies that I continue to suffer from, and it's not over now that I've moved to Kentucky. I wrote this poem shortly after moving there. This is called Allergenesis. They come in their millions, breaking open in the muck. They come with their barnacle bodies blooming. In white, in sulfur colonies they come, rising from radial engines of dark. From millions of low hatcheries they come, unfolding their jaws sequin by sequin. They come hot and star-limbed and buzzing, with their wire bones, with their names turning edgewise in the mouth. Bloodweed, chest vein, the names. Knife clock, mule hook, the names. They come lifting themselves long as sentences in air, spiraling down the rifled barrel of the windpipe. Riven and sweltering and swelling, they come into the body sadly, its blue bag of steam. So I, eater of pith, I, gum knuckles, I, threshing spoon, must move in whiles across the tracheal field, must knock and drag to meet them where they camp, deep in the soft combs of the lungs. Even my breath turns black as I pursue my course. See their millions of insectile wings grown thick with theft. Come, let me clutch at them with my medicine claw and my blood helmet down in the fens of histamine. I guess I'll read a couple eater poems now. And Richard was right in his introduction. I had the good fortune to go to China on 2 different trips, probably about 5 years ago, 5 and 6 years ago now. And what I noticed was that the English translations on menus and signs are often like really weird and not particularly accurate, but they are really neat. And I actually prefer them to just the straight English translation. So the titles of these poems come from the titles of dishes that I was served during the trip, the English translations of titles of dishes, and then the eater is, my invention. Super milk flavor. Lately, the eater has begun to eat again. Egg yolks, guar gum, buttermilk solid spooned up from the pot. She shovels as if there were a medal for shoveling the mounds and mounds of sweetened matter. There is. At the Battle of First Manassas, they brought picnics to the field. They brought ladies in 1,000-pound dresses to stake down the slopes with their tuppets. Their arms, cake soft, inside the fragile bulbs of sleep. Then, sweetness was a fine thing measured in earbobs and applejack. Just as each army attacked with 2 columns, you couldn't eat with your gloves on, nor have a tongue like the eaters, roughened on peanut gravel and threads of desiccated coconut. Now the eater tastes her own blood and understands the word abundance for the first time. It is salt and metal. It is the pulse of lecithin in the curve of every heaped spoonful. Happy is that eater. Happy is she who bringeth to her maw the thousands and 10,000s. Top of a dumpling, top of a temple. The mind of an eater is dark as drink. On market day, she moves like an ocean liner among the cases of edible silver leaf and grilled seahorses. How the hull of her chest tips tenderly toward the lovely lake of eating sounds. Her hunger is metallic swish, is the hook in her clanging mouth, which she fills now with the flesh of spider crabs and wild vegetables. Bell, 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 bell. Her lips and teeth repeat 27 times before swallowing, and again she takes up the fried bread, the shredded beef, and mooncake. Each bite exactly as it surfaces before her. Each bite a small hotness matched with a saltness and touched to the brightness of near lights. The lights drew nearer. Buildings advance inward on their wooden stilts. The eater's lucky tongue gets freighted, gets flat. Her lucky hands fill up with friends. Yes, and why shouldn't friends come calling? The eater ranges blackly. Her heart is a heart of blood. The eater's kind of a dark character. But maybe I'll read. This might be as joyful as the eater can get. I'll read this last one from the eater poem. Herd girl's favorite flower. It's high time for the eater to put on her wedding head and roar at the stars that cinch the sky. Ding dong for diamond rings and sweet white peonies. Ding dong for breakfast built and buttered by the pound. A wedding's quick work for any foam-hipped bride, for any bride with thrusters and a tractor voice. Who says the eater must have herself to heave through lace and eyelets? Let her be large and engaged to anything with blood in it. Shall she marry? Yes, down to her last atom. Shall she travel on the sea? Yes, and her huge parasol shall break like chitin in her jaws. See how she chomps through trash and tempests, how she gallops towards the next good time. Her bridegroom, rather her sea shanty, rather her opera agog with gongs. Here she plummets, my hearties, the very world's reversed. All right, so I guess now I will read some new poems. I was talking to Richard today about self-portraits and what kinds of poems you can make if you sort of think about yourself as making a self-portrait. So these are some poems that kind of fit under that category. This poem is called Young, and it's after a poem by Anne Sexton of the exact same title. 1,000 pilot lights ago, when I'm a teenager, half gone to flab, in a low ranch house crammed with ribboned handicrafts in January. I go pulling all the false candy canes from the stale mulch out front, clown sun blinking whitely over me, my bedroom window and ear painted shut to keep the calliope of dreams from sounding. Nearby, the Douglas fir thickens over older strings of lights, the chipped blue bulbs and the gold, each wrapped in peeling floss and held by keloid blisters to the scruff of an unloved trunk. Probably 1,000,000 tiny ice crystals drift on their rainbow way, while the feverish branches chafe and flake, and I, in my runny custard body, with its buried corkscrew of hate, tell the tree my story songs, and think God can really hear above the cold and the snapping plastic canes, boots, belly, my dreams, what's wrong? My grandmother was one of like 10 children, and as the oldest one, she had to like take care of all the younger ones. And it wasn't always the happiest situation for her. She wanted to go to school and do lots of other things. And one thing that she said was that for a long time, because she always had so many chores to do, she actually didn't know. She thought her name was Little Gal because that's what her mother would call her. Little gal do this, little gal do that. So I wrote some poems that two poems that kind of look at this term, little gal. Self-portrait. Little gal, who knit thee? Dost thou know who knit thee? Gave thee milk and bid thee beg, slid a purse between your legs, stuffed thy brain with blooms of blight, algae, wool, your lichen white. Gave to thee such vicious lungs for breathing glitter past your wrongs. Little gal, I'll tell thee. Little gal, I'll tell thee. I who cut your palms with glass and poured in poison task by task. I am nimble, I am young. I peeled you with a pair of tongs. I laughed when no one loved you back and raked the mist to scarf your flesh. We come together in the dirt, I a rake and thou a twig. All day we watch the long pig dig. All day we watch the long pig dig. And then this one is just called Little Gals. They come at night, skittering their pink claws across my soul slab. I'm a soft deer browsing the woods with strands of willow in my pelt. They lean in to call me out of my name. I shiver and shine in my thicket of one. Do they know about the botch in my belly? I think it's a gel where the white light rots. One says, it's past time, you quickened, and I want to hoof along the dark. You must have some kind of hatch, says another, or hole, says a third in her kit fox voice. That one hangs her face like a slip on the nearest branch, the better to scoop me with her humming snake throat, to snap my ribs like nail rod bite from bite, but I rear back from her, slow egg tooth bent like a steel, open up, comma. Then all three slide down and click their surgical jaws, tongues burning identical red straps of steak. I gallop till I'm fetlock deep in shade of grease-marked trees, March mud dashing its black rankness up my legs. Then I feel algae fruiting into stoneflies, nymphal bodies sweet with blab. In my undercoat, I know inside me is no good in the good lake. And this one, two-poem warning. Do that. Okay. This poem is called Teaching. A chronic condition, sometimes called coffin mouth, characterized by palatal constriction of the human jaw. Collective name for a series of misalignments, see warping, affecting the voice and resulting in its eventual erasure. The decades-long stoving in of the superior dental arch, as from the slow sinking of a thumb, but caused by no discernible force and resulting in a high vault-like appearance of the face. The involuntary protrusion of the tongue through the anterior incisors, especially when moved by emotion. The sobbing sound that emerges when the final scenes of the Duchess of Malfi are read aloud. Vertigo, glitter, an accumulation of nervous perspiration under the clothing, especially in response to silence. An uncontrollable urge to speechify, made worse by heredity or fluorescent lighting. A sadness not requiring treatment, a howling not requiring sadness, the chalk sort of feeling that leavens the mouth in the seconds before speech begins, too much blood at the tongue's surface, the sudden backpack of green birds unzipping in the throat, thousands of fine vertical lines all around the lips as sun rays drawn with a steel knife, the sound a steel knife makes as it splits a sandbag in twain, the twain moving electrically over the heart, and the heart jumping. And this will be my last poem. Last spring, I was able to teach a class on Moby Dick, and so I became kind of obsessed with this part in Moby Dick when Ahab nails the gold doubloon to the mast, if you remember, if any of sadly, that happens. He challenges everybody. He challenges the other sailors that like whoever is the first to spot Moby Dick will get that doubloon. Yeah, it stays on the mast until that can happen. And then they all take an oath saying that they're going to be involved in this project. So for my last poem, I'll read a piece called Doubloon Oath. By dead gal or stove bones, by rainbow or red bird or cracked spine, by silk wrap or jaw, by cold bodice, blush wing, tick or sunk ship, by tipped arrow, glass bite, by weird catch or take that, by chopped mountain, slick house, boat neck or gloss hog, striped awning, gold lawn, by what's that or so much, without me or full prof or nunchucks, blood orange, brain gob, time kill or toy star, by black doll or briar thorn, beg or goo-gaw, by sweetmeat or gunlock or old maid or dreadnought, by weakness or white cap or grief bacon work song, by field work or field mix, slagged field or steel kilt, by bone bruise or knee sock, I get my gift. Thank you.
We've got Eric Lundgren up next, our novelist. And I was looking back over my introduction, and I realized that maybe I made his book sound a little bit light. It's not a light book, and it's about a guy trying to figure out what is what and what is true and what has ever been true in his life. But I realized when I read the book and then I wrote the introduction, just kind of right after that, which is what I like to do. And this book was so funny to me. I know it'd be funny to anyone who read it, but it was like particularly, like I'm not really a laugh out loud and LOL person. I've never written LOL on anything ever. Not Facebook, not text. But I really, I think I actually maybe laughed out loud reading this book. It was just so funny, but it is not a light book. But here's my intro anyway. I just felt like I needed to say that. Like I didn't want Eric to think, you're making my book sound like it's silliness. And it isn't, but I did laugh. It was very funny. So here we go. Wringing laughter out of the bleakest situations, Eric Lundgren has written an altogether modern story with an old-fashioned noir feel. While no simple genre spoof, The Facades opens with the almost pulpy, I used to drive downtown every night looking for my wife. The plot pivoting around Sven Norberg and the disappearance of his opera singer wife, Molly. Vying for the title role in The Facades is the surreal city of Trude, a dystopian place bereft of its former grandeur, for the old tourist motto of lose yourself in Trude has been replaced with the dispirited, we tried. The delightfully eccentric supporting cast includes a razor shade wearing detective named the Oracle, who employs his dream journal when solving crimes, and a band of 13 librarians who, in an armed standoff with police, have holed up in the Central Library, which has been defunded by the despotic mayor and which sits in the shadow of a wrecking ball. Here's one description of the librarians, these guardians of the sensible world. 2 gray-haired women stood on either end of the palatial front staircase, flanked by the blind golden owls. Their dignity was immense. They wore hush puppies. They held shotguns. And actually the descriptions of the library-deprived patrons are some of the funniest in the book. So this is a really funny book, but it's not a silly, light book. So I don't want it, this is literary, serious, but I've laughed, and I think it's hard to make people laugh sometimes in fiction. So, and let me tell you about Eric. He was born in Cleveland and grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. His first novel is The Facades. He studied at Lewis and Clark College and received his MFA from the writing program at Washington University, where he was awarded a third-year fellowship. His work has appeared in Tin House, Quarterly West, and the Quarterly Conversation. He works at, interestingly enough, the 100-year-old public library in downtown St. Louis. Please welcome Eric Lundgren.
Well, thank you. Very glad to be here, and want to say thanks to Styx, Richard, and to Kiki Petrosino. I really enjoyed that reading. That was great. I'm actually not going to read from the novel tonight, because partly because my wife is here and she's heard me read this shit so many times I can't do it to her again. It's a new year. I figured maybe I'd try something different. So I'm going to read a couple shorter things. This was one I actually wrote like a long time ago, like almost 10 years ago, but it was published recently, and it's called The Last Preface. The publisher's database must be obsolete by decades because they called my office. We have a manuscript, they said. Of course, I said. You always do. We need a preface, they said. We can provide a manuscript with the original coffee stains. Unfortunately, I was interested. My preface will be misleading, I warned. We know, the publisher replied. We know all about you. The manuscript arrived in fine shape, I wrote a few days later, but I'm not going to open it for a while. The publisher spent $15.90 to overnight the parcel in the mistaken belief that this would expedite the writing of my preface. But I am an unprolific and obstinate man. Out of sheer boredom, I broke the seal. The coffee stains were mere traces. The manuscript measured 8 by 11 inches and was printed on near translucent paper. The font, 14 point. The typeface, linotype in Fairfield, which, I read, displays the sober and sane qualities of a master craftsman whose talent has long been devoted to clarity. I smoked the first 5 pages after jamming the door with my doctoral robe. I spat phlegm on the next 5 pages. I rolled pages into spitballs and blew them at unsuspecting junior faculty through a hollow pen barrel. I folded paper airplanes which wafted down, digressing all the way to nudge the limbs of undergraduates tanning on the quad. I ate several crucial-looking pages. I taped the remaining text to the wall and shifted it until I found a pleasing arrangement. I was ready to write my preface. The Specian or spec-esque preface, the horribly misleading preface, is a recent development in my interminable career. The shift in my style can be dated precisely, May 12, 1970, the day on which, due to a severe administrative error, I was granted tenure at this institution. Before that day, I'd been only an averagely misleading preface writer. In my early prefaces, I noted the recurrence of certain words, here and there, for example, which I would then dubiously connect to a page of Freud that happened to be lying open on my desk, perhaps noting in an aside that the author's father had been frequently absent throughout his or her probably traumatic childhood. My early prefaces are now repellent to me. They were misleading, but only in a slipshod way. It was mostly the fault of the form, but my incompetence as a writer played a part as well. In the winter of 1969, a publisher sent me a book. Let me say frankly that I wish I had written this book myself. It was clear to me from the get-go that I was reading the book I might have written, were I not a writer of prefaces. It was the book the prefaces had been leading up to, or perhaps the book the prefaces prevented. I made several false starts in the old style, never more aware of my literary poverty. I missed several deadlines. I berated my students and abused myself. After several months, under threat from the publisher, I devised a solution that I still consider the summa of my early style. I retyped the book, word for word, titled it Preface by John Speck, and submitted it to the publisher. We can't afford to print this, they said. It's the only good thing, I began, but they did not listen. After getting tenured, I amused myself by trying to get fired, not through conventional means such as sexual harassment, but through the sheer incompetence of my work. In my prefaces, I would construct anagrams from authors' names. Andrew became Wander. Andrew's book was therefore about wandering, and I felt anagrammatically justified to wander away from the book to other subjects. Instead of mining an author biography, I would relate the book to the life of another author. Some of my prefaces were rants about the junior faculty. Others were encomia to the chocolate, tobacco, and hallucinogens I consumed while writing the prefaces. Everyone agreed that they were misleading. Nevertheless, my mailbox was fuller than ever. Each time my name appeared in print, the university sent me a limp arrangement of flowers, as if a part of me had died. My prefaces began to have a certain cachet. Some people even claimed that I'd become a maker of fictions in my own right. I received awards. My prefaces were collected in a book to which I contributed yet another misleading preface, and soon others began slinging their own scholarly tinsel and light bulbs over the starved tree of my work. My vita swelled. The university asked me to become Distinguished Professor of Humanity and Morality. I declined. I tried new stratagems. In my class, Modern Realism, I showed nothing but a muted, slow-motion episodes of reality shows to a soundtrack of Wagner. But the kids didn't mind. They liked my classes. On evaluations, they wrote, "Professor Speck's pipe smells good," or "That day Speck's tweed coat caught on fire was amazing." One of the junior faculty pulled me aside. "Hey, professor," he said, "why don't you just retire? You hate academia, and besides, you're what, 103? "Because I'm on the verge of something," I said. "You may be wondering about the book in your hands, why it exists, what it has to say about your soul. I'm afraid you are on your own there." Misleading was not what I set out to do. I once aspired to more, but that initial hope fades ever deeper into the fog of my prefaces. It is the nature of my craft to always be looking forward, into a world I may comment upon but never fully enter. I continue to see glimmerings in the distance, but I'm no longer sure what they signify, if they aren't, for example, the ghosts projected on my glasses by this lamp. So there you have it. All right. So among my sort of unprofitable ideas or inventions is this idea of like a Borgesian type encyclopedia that would be called Minor Writers of the Midwestern States. So it'd be like all these biographical capsules of like failed Midwestern writers. So I don't know, I mean it's commercial gold, right? Anyway, this is one of the few entries I've done so far, but it's called Clarence Portis. Clarence Portis, 1946 to 2013, was one of the greatest spellers ever to walk the halls of Exalted Wounds Catholic Elementary in North St. Louis. He was also one of the school's first black students. Pale boys with razor nicks on the sides of their heads pushed him into lockers and called him things, while nuns looked away through the white tunnels of their winches. Not that there was much to see. Clarence never fought back or taunted his attackers, only muttering to himself once they were out of earshot. On Saturdays, he rode the bus with his mother to Central Library and sat at the long tables under the chandeliers. The enormous New International Dictionary had words undreamt of by his pocket Websters. The text seemed to be tailored to his body, the recto and verso spread to the limits of his own wingspan. A live kid with soft features and big face-obscuring glasses, Clarence aspired to that brand of invisibility, which is achieved by literally hiding your face in books at lunch and recess. The Webster's was not big enough for this purpose, so he opted for the Time Life series of illustrated popular history and science books. But even there, he was mainly looking for unfamiliar vocab that he could deploy in the upcoming 1956 spelling bee. Shrapnel, for example, or ordnance. He rolled them around in his mouth, but they were duds. They failed to explode. The 1956 bee took place in the Exalted Wounds cafeteria, still redolent of the dubious tuna casserole that had been served earlier that day. Looking on from one of the beige industrial tables polished with lemon glade, it was terrifying to behold the three nuns in full regalia on their wooden thrones. Safe to say, sweat accrued in Clarence's regulation Oxford shirt and heavy blue slacks. The metallic fans churned like B-52 propellers on the ceiling, inadequate against the late May humidity. One by one, spelling pretenders were dispatched with a little flick of the prioress's hand. The losers sat down with sighs of relief and fanned themselves with scratch paper. Two of the final four bit the dust on obsequious and testimony. That left only Clarence and his bitter adversary, John Spaulding, who'd beaten him in 54 and 55. The latter went on to Wash U and Yale Law, and for a while was a judge on the U.S. Circuit Court in Washington. Spaulding's name was tossed around as a candidate for the Supreme Court for a while, but he never made it to the Senate floor. It might have been the look of almost pervy intensity that later crept into his face, but at this point, he was merely a handsome 12-year-old with curly hair and aquatic blue eyes. The girls at the school, who could not yet dream of being marine biologists, instead wrote John Spaulding in the margins of their notebooks. In addition to the advantages of wealth, stability, whiteness, maleness, etc., in which John Spaulding floated like a fish, the metaphor is too easy, but let's just grab it like Spaulding would have. John Spaulding also had a bona fide superpower, the ability to stop time. This power had been pivotal to his 54 and 55 spelling bee wins. Why he didn't opt to use it here in the semifinals against his familiar opponent, who'd finally folded on Supercilious in 54 and Chthonic in 55, well, it's hard to say. Having this force at your disposal could lead to overconfidence. And it seemed like an awful lot of work in that overheated and tuna-rank cafeteria to squeeze his eyes closed and ball up his fists, which was how Spaulding initiated time stoppage. Not to mention cross the cafeteria to the prioress's throne, wrench the dictionary from her cold and dry hands, find the entry, and then arrange everything, chair, dictionary, nun hands, back to the way they'd been before. Also, it just did not seem necessary because the word was bulletin. Bulletin, Spaulding said. B-U-L-L-I-T-E-N. Bulletin. He heard the error a moment too late. There was nothing he could do. He had a pause button, but no fast forward or rewind. Nevertheless, he squeezed his eyes closed, tasting his own forehead salt, and clamped his fists until the cafeteria around him turned statue. Stopped hands hung over motionless flies. The ceiling fan turned to an inert cross. A nun's fingers stalled over a neck pimple. Expressions sculpted on his classmates' faces, the eyebrows, the oohing mouths, the Spock ears. That he had not only stumbled, but stumbled on such a P-E-D-E-S-T-R-I-A-N word was perhaps the worst humiliation of John Spaulding's life to this point, and it took him a full 5 minutes to admit defeat and release time again. The thing was, whether this was related to Clarence's own powers or some weird, half-hearted, divine intercession, Clarence remained cognizant of the scene the whole time, although he was unable to move or speak just like everyone else. He saw all the frozen white bodies in the cafeteria, saw Spaulding stalking the room, muttering to himself and cursing his own stupidity, even approaching Clarence at one point to yell, "This is not fair," with a clenched malevolence he had never seen on the merit scholar's face before. Clarence would think of these 5 minutes almost every day for the rest of his life, standing there locked in the damp regulation shirt his mother had pressed for him, watching his opponent approach a little girl whose bubble gum was frozen in mid-pop and scream, "I bet even you know how to spell the word bulletin. I am a superhero. Things are not supposed to go this way for me." These were not moments easily forgotten, much less by Clarence, whose brain in later years resembled a mostly empty prison, the few remaining inmates securely bolted in and sentenced to life. Time resumed. "That is incorrect," the prioress said, and turned to Clarence. "The word is congratulations." Clarence's whole body thrilled as he launched a C into the humid and silent air. After graduating from high school in 1965, Clarence took a job at the U.S. Post Office on Tucker Boulevard, just across the street from the library. Although several of his teachers urged him to attend college, Clarence wanted only to be left alone, to savor his private words, and he found this for the most part on the postal route he worked for a decade in Hyde Park. He was granted a close-up vantage of the blocks in those pivotal years when the Spauldings of the world fled the city. Basically, what Clarence saw was white people loading their stuff into moving vans and pickup trucks, one after the other, like his favorite movie, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, in reverse. Their forwarding addresses read Kirkwood, Webster Groves. Some of them did not leave forwarding addresses at all, their catalogs and birthday cards destined for the pulper in the dead letter office. The neighborhood began to resemble a set for a historical film, the brick red mansions, hollow facades. People from the neighborhood began treating the buildings like the shams they were, breaking windows with rocks and lighting fires. It all had a glaze of nightmare to the postman passing on his route. He staged a solitary life in a furnished room a few blocks from his parents' house. Later, he was promoted to the sorting room at the post office, and here Clarence used his gifts to decipher misspelled names and garbled street addresses. He was perhaps one of the greatest mail sorters of all time, at least in the St. Louis office, but the nature of his work was self-effacing. Every time a letter reached the intended hand, he became a little more invisible, and if he did his work perfectly, no one would see him or think of him at all. He was much like the editor of an encyclopedia in this respect. "Uncle Clarence was a strange one," said his nephew, the prize-winning poet Damien Portis. "He is much too successful to be included in this book. I think my mom, when I was a kid, she saw some of the same qualities in me, a kind of unhealthy relation to language. She sent me over to his place to keep him company. Uncle Clarence would feed me these Mexican Ritz crackers and processed cheese. His parrot, Samuel Johnson, got the same food. After Samuel Johnson got a couple crackers in him, he would start spelling words, and man, could that bird spell. Uncle Clarence loved to make that parrot recite obscure words back to him, and he would split a cracker in half, eat part of it himself, and give the other part to Samuel Johnson. The bird did this little head tilt thing when it spelled a word right. I remember thinking it was kind of full of itself. You know who Samuel Johnson was, right? He used to say. Man made his own dictionary. Uh-huh, sure, Uncle Clarence. There weren't many books in that place. Just the dictionary and the Scrabble dictionary and the thesaurus. Alphabet soup and alphabet cereal, as if he could literally eat words. I don't remember us talking much. Words were more of a defense for him, a bulwark, you know? Mostly we just played Scrabble and listened to the Cardinals on the radio. He never got a TV because he loved the word wind-up. You know how the announcers always said, here's the wind-up and the pitch? On TV, they never mentioned the wind-up. I think at some point he kind of lost it, but in some way I'm finding hard to express. Clarence influenced me. For one thing, I inherited his parrot. Samuel lives in the office. My wife, she's not a big fan of Samuel Johnson. I get it. The bird's upsetting, no question. I wouldn't want him in the house either. He sleeps most of the time, but then, you know, out of nowhere, his eyes pop open and he starts spelling the curio words Clarence taught him in the 70s. Sometimes when I'm writing, I'll drape a cloth over his cage so I don't have to look. All the same, I have sympathy for poor Samuel. Every once in a while he comes up with something good and I use it. It was Damian Portis who forwarded Clarence's archive, along with a 1956 diary entry relating the events at that year's spelling bee, to the editors of this encyclopedia. If he had not done so, the strange literary flowering of Clarence Portis's late work would be unknown to readers of Midwestern literature. In a series of greeting cards he sent to relatives in the last years of his life, all bearing the likeness of his beloved parrot, Samuel Johnson, Clarence revisited the word that had brought him his triumph almost a half-century earlier. So glad to hear of your new job. Congratulations in order. Congratulations on your graduation. My sincerest congratulations on your marriage. Delighted to hear of your son's birth. Congratulations. In the course of over 200 greeting cards sent between his retirement in 2003 and his death in 2013, cataloged under Portis Works in our archive, he developed over 100 unique spellings for the word congratulations, which he distributed to friends and relatives around St. Louis. All of the other words in Portis's oeuvre are carefully, correctly spelled. There are no mistakes anywhere as far as we can see. The archive was dispersed among numerous basements, attics, and scrapbooks, with some of Clarence's writings unfortunately consigned to the trash heap or recycle bin, or lost by his successors at the post office, who did not execute their routes with the same precision and care. Still, we can state with confidence that the archive represents a singular project in American letters, not evidence of madness or creeping senility, as some have said. The key to Portis's late misspellings lies half a century before, in his 1956 spelling bee victory, when he'd watched John Spalding pace while muttering about unfairness around that cafeteria full of motionless bodies. There is a similar doomed impulse in Portis to defy time. Portis's late style seems to diagnose a larger disaster in the moment of his personal triumph and seeks to atone for it through language alone. No writer, Midwestern or otherwise, has placed more emphasis on a single word. Whether the late congratulations speak of faith in language's power to heal and inspire, or a despairing hex, or a reflection of our disordered relations with one another, that is not for us to say, at least not here, at least not now. If we knew these things, we would not be operating out of this crumbling office in this weak light with so few windows and so many volumes left to complete. Thanks a lot.